tough spot, the last out of 4. So we have 15 more minutes. Do you want to stand up for 5 seconds? Come on, get some air. Great, stretch your hands and sit down, please. Can you take it for 15 more minutes? Great. Okay, my name is Gustav Rosén. I've been working as an integration architect the last 15 years on the vendor side. And it has all been about APIs, integrations, and API landscapes. I come from a company that's called Untitled Integrations. We have roughly 500 APIs running in production for our clients. So we do API strategy, we do delivery, and we do operations. But I'm not going to talk about that at all today. I'm going to talk about a new certification, Certified Integrator, and covering a bit what's behind that. First of all, this is intended not only for API developers or integrators, it's also intended for end customers of APIs. So the goal here is to create a unifying language, some points to use as reference together with your PMs, your CXOs, and so on. So they realize the importance of APIs, and maybe you can motivate why you need to build certain parts in your APIs in projects. This is a Sunrising ISO person certification according to 17024. So it's the same stuff that Cisco, for instance, has developed for network technicians, but it's now rising for API developers, which I think is great. Just first a quick point. I think you all know this. APIs are part of integrations that are part of integration landscapes. APIs in themselves don't bring a value until anyone uses them, right? So then we refer to integrations as something going end to end. That's why it's called Certified Integrator. This is released the 1st of November. So this is a bit early. It's 1 week in advance, but you can already now go to certifiedintegrator.com and register to get certified. I'm going to explain how you do it. It's a 1-day exercise. And what we're going to do now is that we're going to look at the 10 points, the 10 essentials for end-to-end integration, and also try, if there's time, to cover 5 points for landscapes. It's going to go quick, but I'm going to throw in a lot of contents in there so you can look at it afterwards on YouTube. First of all, 10 essentials for an end-to-end integration. Before we start, how do you create a reference point for someone that is not a developer? What it means to develop APIs in a good way. So we formed a group that talked about this, and we decided that we should look at an industry that is mature. I'm not saying that the IT industry is not mature, but there are more mature industries. For instance, power and electricity. So we introduce here Carl, the customer, in the middle. We have Ingo and Ivan that are integrators, and we have Ellie and Eve that are electricians. And we have had certifications for electricians for quite some time. Why choose the power industry? Well, they have gone through the same journey as we do now in the IT industry. We have had a mess. In some places there is still mess, but there are also maturity and things that we can relate to, for instance, in our homes, which shows that there is order and there is good quality in the power industry. And also, just giving a quick intro to Carl, the customer, he is not only a CIO or a project manager, he also owns a house with electricity in it, and he owns a wardrobe that we're going to come back to. So first of all, the essentials is not covering everything. This is supposed to be the 20% that make 80% of the difference. So looking at what can you do wrong in the power industry? Well, you can do installations without any IDs. You could make your own little diagrams of electricity installations instead of using the standardized ones picked up by the business. You could avoid documenting the voltage in your lines, how things are mediated. Put too much weight on your fuses and blow them. How many have blown a fuse sometime? Okay, good. I can relate to it. Let's not talk about security and electricity. It's not only about personal security, but you can put a fire in your house, make it burn down, which is not good. Reliability is about flickering, lights going on and off, not having predictable solutions. Operability is about being able to manage things, as you saw from the fuse box earlier. And future-proofing is about version management and life cycling. There has been quite some talks about API life cycles in this forum. And it's the same thing with APIs and integration. A lot of these stuffs is not obvious to put in API life cycles, but still you need to have IDs. You need to apply the patterns that is now starting to rise for how you describe your APIs and especially API consumption. There are great ways to document the information, not only implementation-wise with open API standards like Swagger and so on, but also in a business way, in a business language. Documenting your mediations, that's both behind the APIs towards your systems and in front of the APIs applied by the consumers. The scaling challenge, all 4 major banks in Sweden is facing this, putting internet banks on top of old legacy systems, blowing APIs every day. Security, applying the CIA triad on network, transport, and message level, for instance, using OpenID Connect or a similar standard. Reliability, this is about transaction handling. It's about understanding exactly once or at most once in those parts. Operability is about being able to manage your solution, and future-proofing is version management. Semantic versioning with major versions, for instance, where you break backwards compatibility and those types. How many can relate to an integration landscape that is not fully visible in your companies? Do you have a clear view? How many have a full and clear view of your API landscape in your company? Not a single hand. What? How can this be? Because we're throwing in quite some money into it. I think the most obvious thing that happens when it's not documented is that you dig cables, right? We're pretty used to hearing that from electricity. Someone dug a cable, went black. And in our companies, something stopped, and the guy that knows about that API or integration might not be around. He's on vacation or he left the company. So we have the same type of problems. What's good is that there is good practices that we can lend and apply in our industry about identification, patents, information, and so on. Solutions that has worked in the electricity industry. So what we have done is that we have applied the same principles in these first 9 points, putting IDs either through your API management suite or by doing it manually. And remembering here that if you ask a company, for instance Adidas, how many APIs are actually REST APIs, it might not even be 2-digit percentage. I asked last year, so I know. Do we have Adidas still here? Yeah. How many REST APIs do you have versus old integrations?
300.
Okay, but percentage? What?
Maybe 25%.
25%. That's still quite good. That's really good. So 75% is not REST APIs. No Swaggers, no API portals.
Hidden.
Tough. Yeah. What's good for us is that there has been quite some companies in the IT industry working with APIs and integration and landscapes that has done good work in ID standards, standards for patterns, information mediation, and so on, that we can apply. So the whole idea about this certification is to gather around as companies and especially on the customer side, a lot of good in-house developers, and then to unify around this standard and start certifying. 8 minutes left. So quickly covering the 5 essentials for an integration landscape. This problem is it's a quite tough one. according to industry practice, when you build an architecture in an API landscape, you are supposed to reuse up to 70%. For instance, building a system API in front of a system and then using that API instead of directly integrating it to it over and over again. But if you flip this coin, it also means that roughly now, if you don't have order in your wardrobe or in your API landscape, it means that 70% is bought at least twice or developed at least twice. Unfortunately, I share this situation at home. There's a pile on the floor and then there's stuff hanging on in the wardrobe. And I buy a lot of stuff, shirts and so on, that I don't need because I don't have a full picture. So that's not good. This is an even bigger problem in an API landscape, of course, because it's much more expensive if you have 400 integrations or something like that, or even thousands of integrations. I know now that there's a car manufacturer on the West Coast that is up to 45,000 integrations between 1,200 systems. That's huge amounts of money that's wasted there in redundancy. So the message here is that apply some landscape principles, get order. And in electricity, it's about ownership and audience. You want to have documentation in your house, right? Where you can see, okay, who did the installation? I want to be able to call that guy and ask some questions. You want to have some type of architecture in your house, not 2 fuse boxes. It should be 1 fuse box. A lot of companies have 7 fuse boxes at the same time. About discovery and governance, being able to understand where you should hook in. Marketing and onboarding. If you go out on your street, outside your house, you will see that there's a lot of electricity marketing everywhere. Each pole has electricity signs on them. Each box that you have, every 10 houses also have signs and so on. But unfortunately, we're not really there in the IT industry regarding integrations. It's really hard to find people who has built stuff previously. Architecture we might have on paper, but it's not applied. It's not all that understand it, who can relate to it. It can be really hard to discover the right API to use, understand master data management integrations and so on, even file integrations. Is this actually sent? Do I need to rebuild it? Not all companies have API portals internally or externally, so they don't market their APIs. They don't have time to first hello metrics to see how fast you can onboard your APIs. And landscape documentation is usually missing. Not going into deep this, but it's the same principles for sound electricity. You need to find your ownership and audience. You need to apply your architecture. You need to have good documentation when you open that box. It's usually a piece of paper in a good house where you can understand what's there. And landscape documentation that you can find. So same thing here. Most API portals, they cover this really good for REST APIs, but most companies have at least 75%, maybe up to 90% that is not REST APIs, that is not governed in that way. 3 minutes left. So the point of this is getting Ingo, the integrator here, and Carl, the customer, to speak and understand what's important about APIs, not only REST APIs, but other APIs and integrations and landscapes. And as a good point, you can also use this certificate to talk to your vendors. If you pull in a consultant and you need to set the reference frame really fast, you can point to this and say that this is what we think we should have in our company regarding APIs and integration. How to get it? This is the sales pitch. So we thought, how do we make this really easy to get? And then we thought, well, time is the most expensive that we have. So let's make this an exercise where we don't have the ambition to train integrators or API developers, but we should understand the requirements. So it takes 6 hours to go through these 15 points. For each point, you get the definition, you get best practices, and so on and so on. And then you get certified in 60 minutes. So it's 1 day exercise for a developer. It's valid for 2 years. And for clients that want to apply this, it's totally free. All information is available. So you just go to the website and you can use it as reference for your vendors. All right, there's vouchers as well. And there's swag at the stand. The questions was later, right? Okay.
Okay.